Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of A Splash of Paint, brought to you in association with the SAA, Society for All Artists. Let's take a closer look at some of the artistic treats coming up on today's programme. Popular pencil magician Malcolm Cudmore returns to demonstrate a few more magical tips to show how coloured pencils can add shine and polish to your still life drawings in today's Try Your Hand Out project. Leading professional artist Jeremy Ford shares one of his secret techniques for adding delicate details to your watercolour painting. I'll be demonstrating how to paint the simple wave crashing onto a rock, and resident bookworm Henry Malt browses between the pages of another inspirational title available from the SAA reference library. So time to kick things off, folks. Let's join popular pencil magician Malcolm Cudmore as he demonstrates a few more of his magical tips to show how coloured pencils can add some shine and polish to your still life drawings in part one of today's Try Your Hand Out project.
Hello again. You're about to see an artist take a dose of his own medicine, because I'm going to try and attempt something in this session that I would normally get my students often to do in order to get them to think about the big picture rather than get sucked into too much detail, especially when working with coloured pencils. I've set up a small still life over here, which is built into a little corner that I've made out of some pieces of offcuts of mount board. I've got lots of them and I give them to my students, and it's a way of isolating a subject from its surroundings so that you don't end up with loads of extraneous detail. Now normally coloured pencil pictures take ages to develop, so I like to encourage my students to look for the big picture, try and find the biggest values and get something down very quickly to force them out of this kind of too much detail. And I'm going to have a go at it myself now. When I was a kid, I remember an adventure program I used to watch that had part of its caption was something like, "Anything can happen in the next half hour." And that's pretty much what's going to happen now. I've set up in my corner, just for reference, the cardboard that makes up the little corner. I call it a shadow box actually, because it's a great way to control the shadows falling on a still life. Now, this is not especially an exercise in accurate measured drawing. I'm going to see if I can capture something about what the light's doing on this subject quite simply and using the medium of coloured pencil, which, as I've said, is normally a process that takes forever. But let's see how we get on. So yes, anything could happen in the next half hour. As is true of almost every bit of drawing I do, I really try to capture a sense of the overall shape first and then consider my values. Now, in my shadow box, cunningly titled because it does help to control the shadows that fall onto and from all sorts of objects, I'm constantly looking for the strongest values that I can see. And by controlling the light, the amount of light that comes onto the subject, I can very easily see where my major values are. Okay, a pair of pears. I'm using a burnt umber pencil just to start with. It's a bit of a habit of mine. Burnt umber can sort of disappear into any colour that you apply on top. If you're working in coloured pencil, it's not a good idea to use graphite for the underdrawing because coloured pencil doesn't stick to the graphite very well. Okay, now as you can see, inside this very simple setup with this pair of pears, there are some really clearly defined shadow areas. For example, the left-hand one is against a really dark background. The light that's coming in to them from the studio is also making them cast shadows, and I'm literally going to draw the shadow shapes in here as if they were as important as the objects that are casting them. And just getting them in there as fast as I can. Now I'm now already realising that this pair needs to come down here a bit more. It's casting a shadow that way. This pair is also casting a shadow. Because of the direction of the light, I can work out where those shadows need to go to help verify them. This pear is also casting a bit of a back shadow onto this one here. All these things are important. So at the moment they're almost abstract shapes. Right, okay. So, without too much finesse, my job now is to try and identify where my biggest areas of value are. One of the nice things about this little corner box is that it gives me 3 straight lines that help me to kind of locate where everything is meant to go. I know that these points have to meet up because there's an actual corner to the box. So I'm literally just scribbling. This is a really sketchy approach to coloured pencil work, much of which is done in huge amounts of forensic detail. I'm going to break all the coloured pencil artist's rules here by boshing it on as fast as I can, just to identify where my biggest shadow shapes are. I'm sort of not quite on the point of the pencil, but I'm also not exactly using the whole of the flat of the pencil either, just so that I can render a bit of this value in. To start with, I'm looking at this almost in a monochrome fashion, as if it's all kind of black and white. In fact, because I'm using a burnt umber pencil, it almost looks as if it's sepia. Just to bash in a bit of value here. As time allows, I can of course get more and more detailed. What you won't be able to see from the point of view of the camera is that I've actually made a chalk mark on the floor here, which is a bit like a reserved parking space for my right toes. This means that if I stand in a kind of relaxed fashion with my right toe in my parking space, I'm always going to be making all my observations of the still life from exactly the same place, which is quite important, especially as the still life is quite close to me. If I start making observations if I start getting quite close to look at it, I'm beginning to adopt multiple viewpoints, which can give me a problem later on, because I'll think that there are distortions in my picture. So I'm just going to define this back edge of the pear a little bit. I'm going to have to, a little later, I shall use an eraser to clarify some of these shapes. There we go. So I've already begun to get a sense of the biggest tonal relationships in here before I start applying other colours. Nice and dark at the back here. Very sketchy, nice and loose. Now, there is actually, I know the bottom of the still life is actually made of white cardboard. Actually, it has value. Although my brain tells me it's white, there's no point in me leaving it white, it's got some value. So I'm just going to put in a little value here. I also know, although it looks quite light, this wall on the right-hand side is a sort of mid-toned card, so I need to get some value in there as well. So remember, this is a sketch. I'm not going for forensic detail. I'm simply looking for something that is fairly truthful to the values of what light is doing on the objects in this still life. Now, it's helping me to squint quite a lot. I need to squint quite a lot at this just so I can work out within the sort of variegated colour of these pears. There's a kind of patch about here which really doesn't have much bright colour on it. It's a highlight. It's actually a rather fuzzy reflection of one of the lights that's behind me. There's also a fringe of light sort of coming down the pear here, which is also a reflection of the light source that's behind me. So I've now got in here, everything's in the right place pretty well. This is not an accurately measured drawing by any means, but everything kind of belongs together. It's all located nicely in the corner where it belongs. The one pear does appear to be close to the other one. It has an effect on it because it's casting a shadow on it. The pears themselves are casting shadows. I've got a fairly reasonable sense of the principal value relationships with everything in the still life. And when we come back after the break, I shall be applying a little bit more colour to this and paying a bit more attention to the actual colours in the still life. Still using coloured pencil in this really loose fashion. So, as I say, anything could happen in the next 15 minutes. We'll see you very shortly.
Thanks, Malcolm. A delicious, tasty project for you to get your teeth into there, and we look forward to seeing part 2 later on in today's programme. Well, folks, it's time for us to take a short break now, but join us in part 2 when leading artist Jeremy Ford pops into the Splashy Paint studio to share another one of his simple tips to help you add delicate, detailed areas to your watercolour paintings. I'll see you after the break.